Hello everyone, and welcome to English Boost Zone. Thank you so much for clicking on this video today. I'm really glad you're here, and I appreciate you choosing to spend your time improving your English with me. Before we begin, if you enjoy learning English through natural listening practice and real-world examples, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us grow and helps learners around the world reach higher levels of English fluency. Today's session is designed for learners who want to move towards A2 to B2 levels. These are the levels where you don't just understand English, but you start using it confidently and naturally in your daily life. Whether you are listening to improve your vocabulary, preparing for a conversation, or just aiming to sound more like a native speaker, this lesson will give you the immersion and practice you need. Let's begin with a simple question to set the tone for today's practice. Our topic today is very simple: mistake of the week. The restaurant disaster. Specially designed for English learners who dare to speak. Let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever watched someone else make a mistake and felt that strange mix of emotions? A little bit of sympathy, a little bit of relief that it wasn't you, and honestly, if you're being honest, just a tiny bit of laughter. We've all been there. Now, have you ever been the person making that mistake? In public, in front of strangers, in a situation where you really wanted to make a good impression? That feeling, that hot, sudden, almost physical sensation of embarrassment. That is what today's episode is all about. Welcome back to Mistake of the Week, the podcast where we take one real, human, completely understandable language mistake, look at it carefully, understand it deeply, and use it to help you grow as an English speaker. I'm glad you're here, and I mean that sincerely, because the fact that you're listening right now, the fact that you're choosing to spend time improving your English, already tells me something about you. It tells me you're serious. You're curious, and you're not afraid of a little discomfort in the name of growth. Today's story is a little different from our usual episodes, because today, the person making the mistake is not a language learner. Today, our main character is a native English speaker. An American, actually. A confident, well-traveled, well-educated young man named Daniel. And Daniel, despite all of his confidence, walked into a restaurant in Madrid, Spain, opened his mouth, and said something that made an entire table of locals go completely silent. Let's find out what happened. Just imagine. It is a warm Tuesday evening in Madrid. The kind of evening where the sun goes down slowly, the streets fill up with people, and the smell of food drifts out of every open doorway. Madrid in the evening is alive in a way that is hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. There's energy in the air. There's laughter. There's the sound of glasses and conversation, mixing together into something that feels warm and welcoming. Daniel is 27 years old. He's from Chicago. He works in marketing, and he has just arrived in Madrid for a week-long business trip. This is not his first time traveling. He has been to London, Paris, and Tokyo. He considers himself a reasonably cultured person, and he has been studying Spanish, on and off, for about 2 years using a language app on his phone. He is not fluent. He knows this, but he has enough Spanish, he believes, to handle basic situations, to order food, to ask for directions, to be polite. He is feeling good this evening. His meetings went well. His hotel is comfortable, and now he is going to dinner with 3 Spanish colleagues, a woman named Sofia, a man named Javier, and another man named Carlos, at a traditional restaurant in the center of the city. The restaurant is beautiful. Warm lighting, dark wood tables, the kind of place that has been there for 40 years and knows exactly what it is doing. They sit down. The waiter comes. Sofia, Javier, and Carlos order in Spanish. Quickly, naturally, the way people do in their own language. And then the waiter turns to Daniel. And Daniel, who has been preparing for this moment, who has been quietly rehearsing his order in his head for the last 5 minutes, smiles confidently and says, in Spanish, "Estoy muy embarazado." He means to say, I am very embarrassed, because he couldn't understand the menu. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to seem humble and self-aware and charming. What he actually said was, I am very pregnant. There is a pause. Not a long pause, maybe 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, Daniel watches something happen across the faces of Sofia, Javier, and Carlos that he cannot quite interpret. A flicker, a suppressed something. And then Carlos, who has the least control, makes a sound that is somewhere between a cough and a laugh. And Sofia covers her mouth with her hand. And Javier looks at the ceiling with the focused concentration of a man who is trying very hard not to make eye contact with anyone. The waiter, to his enormous credit, simply asks, "What would you like to order, sir?" Daniel, who does not yet understand what he has just said, feels confused. He senses that something has gone wrong, but he doesn't know what. He orders his food in English. He sits back, and then Sofia, gently and kindly, leaning forward with a smile, says, "Daniel, just so you know, embarazado doesn't mean embarrassed. It means pregnant." A pause. Daniel blinks. "I just told the waiter I was very pregnant." "Yes," says Sophia. "You did. And then?" And this is the part that I love most about this story. Daniel laughs. He laughs loudly and genuinely. And Carlos finally lets out the laugh he has been holding for the past 90 seconds. And Javier stops studying the ceiling. And for the next 10 minutes, the four of them cannot get through a sentence without dissolving again. It becomes the best business dinner Daniel has ever attended. Now let's talk about what actually happened. Because this mistake is one of the most famous types of errors in all of language learning. And it doesn't only affect learners. As we just saw, it catches native speakers too. What Daniel experienced is called a false friend. A false friend, or in linguistic terms, a false cognate, is a word in one language that looks or sounds very similar to a word in another language, but means something completely different. The two words appear to be friends. They look like they know each other, but they are not friends at all. They are strangers wearing the same coat. In this case, the Spanish word embarazada, or embarazado for masculine, looks almost identical to the English word embarrassed. Both words even have a similar emotional feeling around them. Awkward situations, unwanted attention, and discomfort. So it feels logical. It feels right. Your brain says, yes, this is the word I need. But your brain is wrong. And this is important to understand. Your brain is not wrong because it is stupid. It is wrong because it is doing something intelligent. It is trying to use what it already knows, English, to fill the gap in what it doesn't yet know, Spanish. This is called cross-linguistic transfer, and it is completely natural. The problem is that English and Spanish, while related historically, diverged in many places. And embarazada came from a Latin root meaning, quote, to place in a difficult situation, or to block. Over centuries, in Spanish, it evolved specifically to mean the state of being pregnant, blocked, in a sense, carrying something inside. The English word embarrassed, meanwhile, came through French and evolved towards social discomfort, the feeling of being awkward in front of others. Same Latin family, very different destinations. Now let's think about this from a learner's perspective, because even though Daniel is a native English speaker, the lesson here applies to you too. You may have learned vocabulary from a list, or from translation, or from a language app. And sometimes, words that look similar across languages genuinely do share a meaning. The Spanish palabra problema, for example, really does mean problem. The Spanish word hospital really does mean hospital. So your brain learns to trust these visual similarities. And then, one day, it trusts the wrong one. This is why advanced learners are encouraged to learn vocabulary in context rather than in isolation. When you see a word used in a real sentence, in a real situation, your brain stores not just the word but the meaning, the emotion, and the setting around it. And that deeper storage makes it far harder to confuse. Here are a few other famous false friends between English and Spanish that many learners and travelers have discovered the hard way. The word sensible in English means reasonable or practical. In Spanish, sensible means sensitive or emotional. Very different. The word actual in English means real or current. In Spanish, actual means current or present. Closer, but still confusing in sentences. The word embarrassed in English, as we now know, has no equivalent in Spanish that looks similar. The correct Spanish word for feeling embarrassed is avergonzado. Longer, less familiar, easy to forget. And so the brain reaches for what looks closer. This is the trap. And now that you know it exists, you are already better protected from it. I want to stay with Daniel for a moment, because here is the thing that I find most interesting about his story. It is not the mistake itself. The mistake is funny, yes. It is a wonderful mistake. But what interests me is what happened after. Daniel laughed. He didn't freeze. He didn't apologize 17 times. He didn't spend the rest of the evening feeling small and embarrassed, truly embarrassed, in the English sense of the word. He heard what he had done. He understood it, and he laughed. Loudly. Honestly. In front of 3 people he had met that morning. And that response, that willingness to be human in front of other humans, turned a potentially awkward moment into a connection. Those 4 people have a shared memory now. A story they will tell. A dinner they will not forget. Think about what would have happened if Daniel had responded differently. If he had gone quiet and red-faced. He had said very little for the rest of the meal. If he had let the embarrassment, the real embarrassment, take over. The dinner would have been forgettable. The relationship with his colleagues would have stayed formal. The evening would have passed without leaving anything behind. Instead, he laughed. and everything changed. Now I want to ask you something directly. When you make a mistake in English, and you will make mistakes, because everyone does, because mistakes are part of learning, what is your first instinct? Do you laugh? Do you freeze? Do you go quiet? Do you apologize too many times? Most learners, if they are honest, lean towards silence or apology. We are taught in many cultures that mistakes are signs of failure, that getting something wrong in front of others is something to be ashamed of. But I want you to consider a different idea. What if the mistake is not the end of the moment, but the beginning of it? Daniel's mistake opened a door. It turned 4 strangers at a business dinner into 4 people laughing together. It created trust faster than any polished sentence could have. Your mistakes in English can do the same thing. When you get a word wrong and laugh about it, native speakers don't think less of you. Most of the time, and I say this with complete sincerity, they think more of you. Because you tried, because you took the risk, because you showed that you are someone who is willing to be imperfect in the pursuit of connection. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, a very large thing. There is a line I think about often. It comes from the writer Brené Brown, and it goes like this. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is our most accurate measure of courage. Saying a sentence in a language you are still learning is an act of vulnerability. Every single time. And every single time you do it, you are being brave. Not reckless, not careless. Brave. Don't let the fear of sounding imperfect keep you from speaking. The world does not need your perfect English. The world needs your voice. So, let's bring this together. Today we met Daniel, a confident young man from Chicago who walked into a restaurant in Madrid, tried to be humble, and accidentally told a waiter he was pregnant. We looked at why it happened. The classic false friend trap. The natural but sometimes misleading instinct to trust similar-looking words across languages. And we talked about what his response to the mistake can teach us about confidence, connection, and the courage it takes to speak imperfectly. Here is the thing I want you to remember after today. Every language in the world has false friends. Every learner, at every level, falls into them. The gap is not between people who make these mistakes and people who don't. The gap is between people who let the mistake stop them and people who let it teach them. Be the second kind of person. I'll leave you today with a quote that I think captures everything we talked about. You can't cross the sea merely by standing and staring at the water. Rabindranath Tagore. You have to get in. You have to move. You have to risk getting it wrong. And before I go, I have one question for you. Take a moment and think about it. You don't have to answer out loud. Just let it sit with you. What is one word you have been avoiding using in English because you are not sure if you are using it correctly? Whatever that word is, use it this week. Use it in a sentence. Use it in a conversation. Use it in a message to a friend. Get it wrong if you have to. Find out. Learn. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. Thank you for spending this time with me. This has been Mistake of the Week. I'll see you in the next episode. Keep speaking. Keep growing. Even when, especially when, it feels uncomfortable.